If you've never heard of the listing of impairments, well, make sure you're sitting down because that's what we're about to get into right now. In the SSA Disability Verse, we call this the Blue Book, the resource DDSs use to automatically allow you for SSDI. I'll even show you how to find it and how to make sense of it when you do get there. If you're ready for this, let's get it started. Every disability examiner for Social Security uses the same process that they've been trained in, the 5-step sequential evaluation process to determine whether you are disabled or not under Social Security's rules. Step 3 of this process is talking about whether your severe impairment meets or equals a listing. Well, I'm sure you're wondering, what the heck is a listing? We're about to find out right now. Back in the days of paper cases when I started out in the DDS, every disability examiner was given what is called a blue book. And it was called a blue book because the cover of the book was blue. It was a paperback book with a blue cover. This book is called the Listing of Impairments. What this Listing of Impairments really deals with is the criteria that you need to meet for your specific impairment to determine whether it is severe enough to be an allowance on medical grounds alone. So you don't have to get into anything else with the case. If your impairment falls within the criteria of that particular impairment that will say that this will keep you from working for 12 continuous months, keep you from earning SGA, or even may result in death, then that will be an automatic allowance, slam dunk, no questions asked. Now, there are 3 things you need to know about the Listing of Impairments or the Blue Book before we go any further. The first thing you need to know is that the Blue Book is highly detailed and highly technical. We're talking lab readings, we're talking test results, we're talking specific treatments. This medical terminology that most people will have never heard of. It gets into like granular stuff. I mean, just down to the decimal point, the hundredths of a decimal point. I mean, it's just so technical and it gets so granular, so down in the nitty gritty on every single impairment that you could think of, and then some. So it's very, very technical with a lot of medical jargon, a lot of criteria, and so on. The second thing you need to understand about the Blue Book is that it will be confusing to the person who has not been trained to work on Social Security claims. There could be different criteria, there could be different conditions for meeting the criteria. There could be 5 different types of spinal injuries that are specified in the medical listings. In the Blue Book, there's a mention in the section for chronic liver disease. There are 8 different ways that you can be allowed based on chronic liver disease. And in each of those ways, there are different criteria for each of those ways. So it can be very confusing and very, very involved. Trying to figure out, okay, if I want to meet a listing for chronic liver disease, I gotta meet this criteria with all of his details, or meet this one, or meet this one, or meet this one. And it can be very confusing. The third thing I want to mention about the Blue Book is that you can be allowed even if you don't meet a listing. That's what's called equaling an impairment. It could be a combination of impairments that will be equal to a listing, or it could be something that is not in the listings now, but because it is so severe, it's almost like meeting this listing. So you can meet a list, you can equal a listing and still be an allowance, but that gets even more confusing. There's analysts at the DDS right now who have never seen an equal listing. I'm going to tell you right now, equaling a listing is very rare, and it's going to need the help of an MC, a medical consultant, to navigate that process, unless the person is very on point and has been very experienced in working on the claims. So that is another way to be allowed automatically on the medical alone, but it's far more difficult to equal a listing than it is to meet a listing, because with meeting a listing, everything is spelled out. Now, the best way I can show you the blue book is to take you through it and to help you understand exactly what I'm talking about in the video. So here it comes right now. Okay, here we are at the listing of impairments, aka the blue book. I've provided a link in the description in case you want to click on it, go to the page and follow along with me at some point. Here we have the listing of impairments, and there are actually two sets of impairments, one for adults and also a listing of impairments for children. There are disabled children cases at the DDS, but our focus is going to be on the adult listings. In the main section of the page, you have different body systems. You have musculoskeletal disorders, special senses and speech, respiratory disorders, cardiovascular system, digestive system, genital urinary disorders, hematological disorders, skin disorders, endocrine disorders. Scroll down a little bit. The section 10.0 is congenital disorders that affect multiple body systems, neurological disorders, mental disorders, cancer or malignant neoplastic diseases, and immune system disorders. I mentioned earlier in the video that there are 8 different categories for chronic liver disease, and I want to show you that right now. So we're going to go to digestive system. I'm going to click on that, and it takes you to a different page. So the first part of the listing is called a preamble. It is basically a write-up of the type of evidence that is necessary to establish the impairments, the types of disorders that we find under this body system, and also what it's going to take to be able to establish the severity of these disorders. We're not going to spend a lot of time on that because it's a lot of reading, and each body system has a preamble. But like I said, we're not going to focus on that right now. As you look at the page, you see this area called section. This is what is going to be your focus in being able to look at your condition and see exactly what the criteria is in order to meet or possibly equal a medical listing. So it starts with 5.01, so we're going to click on that, and it takes us right to the first one. 5.01 is just a heading. So whenever you see the 0.01, that's just a heading of the category of impairments and the criteria for those disorders. Now, you see here 5.02, gastrointestinal hemorrhaging from any cause requiring blood transfusion. Here is one. 5.03 and 5.04 are reserved, which means that there is not a disorder or impairment that is listed for that particular category entry. So they're reserving that for sometime in the future. Maybe something else will come up that may be qualified as a listing level impairment. Now here we have 5.05, chronic liver disease, and it says with. So here we're gonna see the criteria, and there are 8 different types of criteria, and I'm not gonna go through all of them. I just want to show you a couple just to give you an idea how detailed this is. So 505A is hemorrhaging from esophageal, gastric, or ectopic varices, or from portal hypertensive gastropathy. Yeah, right. I told you it is going to be a lot. There's going to be a lot of medical jargon and terminology that you probably wouldn't know of. But here we have it's demonstrated by endoscopy, some kind of endoscopy or X-ray or other imaging resulting in hemodynamic instability as defined in 5.00D5. It takes you right back to the preamble. And requiring hospitalization for transfusion of at least 2 units of blood. If you meet this listing, it says you are disabled for 1 year. So consider under disability for 1 year following the last documented transfusion. And then after that, you can evaluate once the case comes up on review. So that's one set of criteria, 505A. Now let's look at 505B. 505B says ascites or hydrothorax, not attributable to other causes despite continuing treatment as prescribed, present on at least 2 evaluations, at least 60 days apart, within a consecutive 6-month period. That's a lot of detail. It's very technical. So what's going to happen is the analyst is going to look at physical examinations and lab results to determine if there have been 2 evaluations 60 days apart within a 6-month period where there is presence of ascites or hydrothorax. And it has to be documented by these criteria: paracentesis or thoracentesis. I'm not gonna go there. I'm not gonna talk about that. I want to scare you off the video. Or some labs, or imaging. But here, this is where it gets tricky. It says number 2, appropriate imaging or physical exam, and one of the following, one of these lab results. So the listings can really be tricky if you're not reading carefully. The ands and the ors are really going to be key elements to understanding what criteria you need to meet. Now, let me go back a screen or two and go back to the actual listings. I want to show you one particular one, and that is under genital urinary disorders. So we're going to click on that one, and we're going to click on 6.01, which is the category heading. 6.03 is chronic kidney disease. Now, as you see, there's 603, 604, 605. They're all chronic kidney disease, but there's different criteria. Under 603, chronic kidney disease, under this listing, all that is needed to show that you meet a listing is that you are on chronic dialysis, either hemodialysis or peritoneal dialysis. That's all that's needed. And if the records show that you are on dialysis, you are an automatic allowance. There is not even a need to develop the case any further. Once there's a record, the medical evidence that shows that you are receiving chronic dialysis, and that's not to say that there are types of dialysis that are not chronic, maybe for a temporary period of time. But if it's chronic because of chronic kidney disease, usually stage 4 or even stage 5, then you would be an allowance. That is a snapshot of what the listings look like. So if you want to peruse these body systems and see which conditions or impairments you have and see what it takes to meet a listing, then you have access to it if you have Wi-Fi or some kind of internet access. And there you have it. That is the listing of impairments, the Blue Book. And I hope this has been enlightening for you. It helps you understand exactly what it's going to take to be an allowance for ssdi on the medical issues alone. It's complicated, it can be confusing, but if you're able to understand this in some small way, then it's going to help you understand what it's going to take for your impairment or impairments to be allowed without having to get into your work history. Stay tuned for the next video. Now, don't leave me hanging because I'm going to be meeting you on the other side.